Okay, today's presentation may be a little long. I hope to finish it in an hour. If not, be patient with me. And again, I thank you for participating in this series of webinars. Today's topic is about fertilizers. Of course, I'll talk a little bit about organic versus inorganic. You use what you like to use. I'm going to give you information in terms of N per 100 square feet, N per acre, things like that. Not this one is better than that one. Personally, I think the plant does not know the difference. They just want NPK and all the other minerals. So they both have advantages and disadvantages, and we'll get to some of that. But it's definitely important to know that the major fertility problem we face is overuse. And homeowners are more guilty of that than commercial growers. Commercial growers, it costs money. And adding an extra cup over 100 acres will add up to a lot of money. So they want to, it's a monetary decision. Homeowners, we tend to be generous. If the label says a teaspoon, we put a couple of teaspoons. It's normal. I do that. So with overuse, you may have runoff, leaching potential to contaminate groundwater and streams. Unfortunately, a bag like what you see here, 1313, is a lot cheaper than a small container of a home that a homeowner can buy at, let's say, $6, $7, or $10 compared to this 40-pound bag that is $40. You do the math. The price per pound of N, it's something like 3 cents compared to $1. So it's cheap, you use it, you may be over applying some of the minerals that you really don't need. Keep this in mind when you're thinking about your fertility. You want to understand the role of the various elements. Would be nice to do periodic soil analysis. The tissue analysis, I put a question mark because that's really more for commercial producers. I don't want you to worry about that if you're a homeowner. So soil analysis, if you're in a new garden, definitely get one before you start your garden, and maybe one another year, like per year for next 2 or 3 years, just to have a feel of what you're adding, what you're harvesting, and what's happening to the soil. And for $10, $7 to $10, $12, depending what you're analyzing, it's really a good deal once a year. And you want to add precisely the amount of nutrient that you want, and its scheduling. And basically, ideally, you want to balance how much fertilizer you're adding to how much you're harvesting. This way, you're not under applying. Or you're not adding too much that the residue remain in the soil, and like I said, you may have potential of leaching and things like that. All right, so let's start with the role of some of the minerals and why we call NPK, for example, primary nutrient or major element compared to calcium, magnesium, and sulfur. Why do we call them secondary and the micronutrients? NPK, the plant needs something in the 5%, 10%. And if you keep in mind that 1% is 10,000 parts per million, you'll see that why NPK are called primary nutrient. If the plant needs 5 to 15% of NPK, the plant requires about, 3 to 5 parts per million of the secondary nutrient. So you can see the difference. 5 times 10,000, 50,000, for example, of N compared to 5 for calcium. And the zinc and the rest on that list are called micronutrient because the plant may need 0.1, 0.2, 0.5 parts per million. So that's why. One parts per million, you can imagine, it's like a drop in a swimming pool of water. So you think it's a tiny amount, but it's definitely necessary, and without it, the plant will show you deficiencies. Nitrogen is your major concern. Nitrogen is for leaves, for green. Anything that you're growing that's green, you need nitrogen. So N is for leaves. A major concern because nitrogen moves with the water, very water soluble. So you may apply fertilizer, you may get a rain, an inch of rain, 2 or 3 days later, take a soil sample and send it, and the soil test result tells you no nitrogen at all in the soil. And it's possible because that inch of rain that you got may have washed down the nitrogen below from the area that you sampled from. That's why, I tell everybody, don't worry about the N in your soil analysis, add something. It's very water soluble. It's better to add a little bit often instead of a lot at one time and risk of losing it when you think it stayed in the soil. So it's very water soluble, and it is for the green tissue or leaves. If you're growing anything that you would call leaf, like greens, N is your concern. You want N. Phosphorus is for roots. If you're growing any kind of root crop, or you want to encourage new seedlings to produce roots and to grow, phosphorus is important for that. So the role of phosphorus is for roots. That's the one that we call most abused element in Texas, in the sense that it is the opposite of N in the solubility. It is insoluble. You put a drop of phosphorus on the soil, it will stay there for 20 years if it's not picked up by the plant. So, and our soils have phosphorus in it, yet we keep adding because, like I showed you, that bag of triple 13, it's very cheap, and people just buy it and they keep adding more phosphorus than what you need, and and hence we call it the most abused element in Texas. So let's recap. N, very water soluble for leaves. P is very water insoluble for roots. And K is for fruits. So NPK, remember that, is leaves, roots, fruits. In terms of usage, or in terms of solubility, it's in between N and P. So it moves with the water, but not as much. So it may take a whole year before it moves out of the root zone, compared to overnight, if you get, or for 2 days in case you get an inch of rain. This is not usually limiting in our areas, unless you have a very deep sandy soil like we have in East Texas, and of course we have 60 inches of rain per year. Potassium, then with that amount of rain we have, and because it's sandy soil, you may run out of potassium in the soil. So get a soil test. Anywhere else, I'll tell you, forget it. We have phosphorus, we have potassium. Just add nitrogen. You want to save $10? Just add fertilizer, like I'm going to show you shortly. All right. So a successful fertility program, you need, like I said, you need to understand the role of those various elements in the plant growth, and I told you a little bit about them. N is for leaves, phosphorus is for roots, potassium is for fruits. This looks, I've shown this, sorry, this slide is, okay. Soil analysis, be careful when you do soil analysis. Results are site-specific. Don't measure one, don't take a sample from one raised bed and think it's going to apply for all your raised beds. Maybe take a little bit from all of them, mix them together and send them. This way you get soil test results for the average. Or if you have 40 acre and you sample one, it's not going to be, results are not going to be representative of the whole 40 acres. Okay. Um, and of course, I recommend that you don't take results from one lab and send it to another lab and tell you what do you recommend, because they use different extraction techniques, they have different solvents. So you can send a sample, exactly the same sample, split it in two and send it to two labs, and you will get different results. That's it happens because of the different solvents that they have, the different methods that they send you. So it is not a 100% accurate science. It's just a guide of what we found, what we can tell you. It's better than nothing. But if they tell you you have 510 parts per million, it's not exactly 510. This is what they got at that time from that sample you sent them. You can send one the next day and it may be 620. It's just a start. It's a great start, necessary, but don't be surprised if you get different results from two different locations. It's normal. For Texas A&M, we follow this scale. If you send a soil sample to a soil testing lab on campus in College Station, you'll see a bar and you'll see some numbers and you'll see very high, high, medium, low, and very low. What do they mean in terms of yield response to those descriptions? High and very high means don't bother adding any fertilizer. You will not get a gram of extra growth if you add any fertilizer. If you get a medium result, like your nitrogen is in the medium range, you can get about 75% of your maximum yield without additional fertilizer. There is nutrition there. There is so nitrogen in the soil, if we're talking about nitrogen, and you will get yields, but you'll get about 75% of the maximum potential yield if you don't add anything. Low, if the result shows you, for example, your phosphorus is low, you can still get about 50% of the maximum yield. It doesn't mean zero. Even if it's very low, you can get 25% of the yields, depending on the crop, depending on the amount of rain, depending on the year. Well, 25%, of course, that's not commercially feasible. That's not good for a homeowner, but that's what those numbers mean. Some people say, hey, I'm happy with 50% of my potential yield. I'm not going to add anything. That's what those numbers mean. Okay. In terms of numbers, what low, medium, and high means for nitrogen, low, your parts per million for nitrogen is anywhere between 0 and 25. For medium, it's between 25 and 50 parts per million of N. And for if your soil test tells you you have high nitrogen, so the results are 50 to 80 parts per million. And again, the same thing for phosphorus and potassium. These are numbers. I prefer to teach you practical information. This is a great slide, but let's skip over it. I want to teach you something more practical. When you thinking about fertilizer, you want to keep this RPS acronym in mind. RPS means how much I want to apply, the rate, where do I want to apply it, that's the placement, and when do I want to apply it. How, where, and when is the three best factors for a successful fertility program. And let's go over them in more detail. So let's say you want to fertilize and you didn't get a soil test. Here's a practical information that you can go with. Put half a pound of N per 1,000 square feet before planting and incorporate. And then 1/10 of a pound of N per 100 linear feet every 4 weeks. Now, pound of N, not pound of triple 13 or pound of half a pound of chicken litter, or half a pound of fish emulsion, half a pound of N. So you need to learn to do some math, how to convert that, and I'll show you. But please, when you see N, it is the nitrogen we're talking about, not the product, the amount of product we're talking about. You're lazy like I can be, you don't want to get a salt test, follow this recipe, okay? You get a salt test, make sure when you send a sample that you specify that it's a vegetable garden. This way the results come as amount per 1,000 square feet, like it's in here. Because if you don't, the results will come back as amount per acre. And another suggestion I can make is don't just say vegetable garden. Tell them I'm growing tomato, pepper, squash, cucumber. They can give you recommendation for each of those crop for the same price instead of average for all the vegetables. Okay, so let's look closely. Remember, I told you very low, low, moderate, high, very high values and how they affect potential yield. That's what they are here. CL is the critical level. That's this line here. So meaning that the amount of nutrient has to be minimum here to have a decent crop. So anything with close to it, like nitrate, you see, it doesn't really actually get to the critical level, but they still tell you 0 pound of N because you're very close. It's not worth adding a tablespoon. Phosphorus, like I told you in Texas, typically we have very high levels of phosphorus. Like I told you in Texas, we have typically very high potassium level. And look, all of them are at the mark or almost there, except for sodium. Sodium is the only one you want to be low. You don't want salt. So that's the only one where you prefer to be low or less. So that's one is great to have low, and the rest it's great to have right here at the critical line. This is a sample I took years ago from my raised bed after I added a lot of compost. Beautiful, pH 7.2, nothing I had to add, no lime. Life is good. I can just plant and have a wonderful garden. So, if you don't, like I said, if you don't tell them it's a vegetable garden, then the results will come back as a pound per acre. And remember, this is pound of N, pound of P2O5, K2O, etc., not the 1313. You'll have to calculate and see how much that 35 pound means in 1313, and I'll tell you that. This is from a truck farm, and hey, this is a great salt test. But you say, Joe, well, look, nitrogen is low. That's fine. I told you, nitrogen may always be low. He may have sampled it right after a rain or whatever. Growers, homeowners, you should not worry about N is low because you have to add N. Okay, and the other one that's low is sodium, which is great. We want that low. So this is artificially low. I call it artificially because the grower is not concerned. They always have to add nitrogen. They always do. This is a commercial operation. They exhaust the soil from the nitrogen. Whatever they add, they harvest it. So they know next year they have to add some more. They did not add as much compost like I did in the previous slide. So I'm not surprised that it's slow here. No big deal. No concern to me, no concern to the grower. Of course, they did not do a full test. They did not analyze iron, zinc, manganese, Their only concern in the primary and secondary nutrients. Good soil pH 7.1, no lime added. Hey, you can just add urea or only a source of nitrogen and have a great garden. Now remember, a soil test, whatever recommendation you get from a soil test, like in this case 35 pound, is a pre-plant recommendation, not a season-long recommendation. This is what you have to add to the soil before you start planting. In this case 35, and my raised bed, nothing. Okay? And I told you I added compost. The compost came from a cover crop I had the previous year. Let me show you a few slides about the importance of cover crops of organic matter. Commercially, on a large scale, people take care of their cover crop because it can save them a lot of money. Briefly, I'm not going to go into this into detail. It's very boring. Let's say the recommendation is 130 pounds of N per acre. They account for the organic matter, the legume that they had the year before, the sampling time, etc., etc. They end up having to apply 93. So remember, 40 acres to 100 acres, 1,000-acre operation, the difference between applying 93 pounds per acre versus 130 is a big difference. They save a lot of money. For you, just worry and think that I just want to have a cover crop. I want to add organic matter. I want to add food for the microorganisms in the soil that will feed the plant. Because when you fertilize, you're feeding the soil, which in turn is feeding your plants. And here's the physical, pictures as a proof of the importance of organic matter. This is an old research I did in College Station. Of course, the soil, I added a lot of mushroom compost, incorporated it, made the beds, planted, and I added all of this mulch that you see. Sorry, what happened? What happened? Here. I added a lot of that mulch that you see here, covered this whole area, which was about 50 by 100 and bigger than this, and because there are two plots. I mean, really a thick area. We did the study over 2 years, and at the end of every year, we'll incorporate the mulch into the soil. So you can imagine a lot of organic matter in the soil and on top of the soil that got incorporated. So here is the same area in 2013 when we went to plow the field. You can see the edge. I think you can see, like I do, the dark soil here compared to the lighter sandy soil here. All of that is organic matter. I mean, you can see clearly the line, straight line, where the organic matter ended. I took a sample of the soil here and tested it. And remember that 1% organic matter in the soil is equivalent to 20 pounds of N per acre. And when I got the soil test results back, here it is. I had 19.55 pounds of N, 19.55% organic matter. So I have in that soil the equivalent of about 400 pounds of N per acre. So, and look, pH is very nice. Everything is where at the critical level or more. Sodium is low where you want it to be. Zero recommendation to add. Zero lime to add. Beautiful soil. You can throw anything in that plot and it will grow very well without having to add anything for the first 2, 3, 4 weeks of growth, which is a lot of savings, whether for a homeowner or commercial growers. So why am I going back? Okay. Now, Many of the recommendation I told you is per 1,000 square feet, but you tell me, okay, I'm not using a raised bed, which I know it's 4 by 8, that's 32 square feet. I'm planting my garden in linear rows. They're 50-foot long rows. Okay, that's easy. This is how you fix it. This is how you find what's your area, what's your square footage that you need to fertilize. Let's look at this example. Sweet corn recommendation is to plant at 2.5 to 3 feet between rows. Well, then your row width is 2.5 to 3 feet. So let's say then you want to plant 20 feet of row, then your area you're fertilizing is 2.5, or you can choose 3 if you like. I chose 2.5, 2.5 by 20. I'm fertilizing 50 square feet. Do you have to spread that fertilizer on 2.5 width? No, we'll talk more about that. But this is the amount that you want to calculate. It tells you so much pound per 1,000 square feet. Well, you have 50 square feet. You do the math and you see how many ounces or how many that you want to spread on that line, on that 20-foot row of corn. So if you know your square footage, raised bed 4 by 8, great. If you don't, then here's how to do it. Just look up what's your plant row spacing recommendation. And on Aggie Horticulture, on this link, in the vegetable handbook, the appendix of table 4, there's a whole list, complete list of row widths for various crops. Okay. Now let's talk a little bit about organic and inorganic, compare the two. Organic is not likely to burn plants compared to, for example, urea. You sprinkle some urea, and if a grain lands on the foliage, it will burn that leaf. All right. You spill blood meal, it's not going to harm, but you spill ammonium nitrate, and you can burn the roots. So that is one advantage, one plus for organic. Another plus for organic is it adds a small amount of humus to the soil. Disadvantage of organic is that it's much more expensive per unit of N or K or P. And another disadvantage is because it has a small amount of NPK in it percentage-wise, you have to use larger amount needed per area compared to chemical fertilizers, inorganic fertilizers. The next two slides are for your use. I'm listing here the fertilizer name, the NPK analysis in the middle table, and the recommended application rates. Of course, if you buy a product, I suggest you read the label carefully and use what they recommend. These are per 100 square feet. Sometimes the label tells you per foot or per gallon, like a teaspoon or 6 tablespoons per gallon. So this is for example, for alfalfa meal is 2 to 5 pounds per 100 square feet. And remember, in the last couple of slides, I showed you how to calculate your square footage, even if you plant your crop in rows, not in a raised bed that's 32 square feet. That guano is 5 to 10 pounds, blood meal, bone meal, 5 to 10 pounds. Compost that is plant-based, 2 to 3 inch minimum. You can add 6 inches, you can add a foot, you're not going to hurt anything. It's just expensive. All right, but compost that has animal manure in it, that you have to be careful. You cannot be over generous because it's hot, it has lots of N, it can burn, so 1 inch or less, spread a 1 inch or less thick layer and incorporate it. Another note I want to point out in this slide is that keep in mind that organic fertilizers are not quite regulated. So I can blend some fish emulsion, take a fish, blend it, put some triple 13 in it, and call it Joe's Miracle Fertilizer and sell it. Nobody's going to tell me, Joe, you're cheating. You're trying to sell organic fertilizer when it's not. So one clue to tell if it's going to raise an alarm in your head or not is look at the N number. If the N is more than, let's say, 12%, 12, 13%, let an alarm, go in your head and say, I'm not going to trust that hasn't been spiked and they are cheating me. You will never find, for example, like urea is 4600. You'll never find anything that's organic that's naturally 40 or 30%. If they do that in the future, possible, but as of today, let's say 12, 15%, let's be generous and say 15%. Anything more than 15%, question it if you want to use 100% organic fertilizer. Corn gluten meal, feather meal, fish emulsion, fish meal. Here's the NPK analysis, and here is their application rate. So you can see, look at the last two slides. We're adding 5 pounds, 10 pounds, 40 pounds, 2 to 5 pounds. Compared to a chemical fertilizer, you could be using a cup or a cup and a half or 2 cups compared to in the same area to get the same amount of NPK. That is what I told you earlier, a previous slide, that you have to use a larger amount, and these numbers prove it. Okay, so we talked about briefly about how much to apply, and I'll show you some more information on that. Now, where do you apply it? Okay, well, there are many toys available. If you want to broadcast your fertilizer, there is this broadcast available in many garden centers. People use it for seed when they are seeding or for fertilizer. You can band it, dig a trench. So if this line here is where your line of seeding or transplanting, you go 2 inches to the side and 4 inches deep, and you dig a trench with the corner of the hole and you spread your fertilizer. Or you can use fertigation, meaning fertilizer that's injected with the water. This is a Venturi system. It's about, $20. It can work for shorter gardens, for small gardens. If you want to have a huge garden, then there are bigger injectors, more expensive, but they work like a charm. You just add the water-soluble fertilizer here, organic or inorganic, and every time you're watering or whenever you want to fertilize, you put the hose in there, and when you are watering, you're adding fertilizing right at the roots where you want them to be. Okay. And this is a close-up of the handheld fertilizer spreader. So where do you apply? Let's say you want to use broadcast. I recommend that you put half the total amount of the complete fertilizer needed incorporated before planting, and then side dress or top dress the remaining amount of fertilizer 2 or 3 times during the growing season, let's say every 2 to 3 weeks, something like that. That's if you want to broadcast. You want to use that tool, and you want to use it for fertilizing. Your soil test tell you, let's say you want a pound of triple, and you choose triple 13, for example. You put half a pound. You use this toy to spread it on your area. You mix it in. The other half, you split it into 2 or 3, and then every 2 to 3 weeks, you can side dress it. You can broadcast it and incorporate it because you have a crop there. So you just have to side dress it, like I told you, 2 inches to the side, dig a trench with a corner of a hole, and spread that amount in the area. If you choose to all your fertilization program to be as a band, and again, let's take the sample of a pound. Then half of that, you put it on two bands, one on either side of the where you're gonna seed or transplant. 2 inches deep, 4 to 6 inches on either side of where you're gonna seed or where you're gonna transplant, and then the other half you side dress or top dress the remaining amount, again split over 2 or 3 times. Some people like to work in the garden, they like to work the soil. They say, oh, banding, I like banding because it's an opportunity to hoe a little bit, get rid of some of the weeds. And while I'm weeding, okay, I'll dig a trench and then I'll band. It's very easy, no need to buy an injector, no need to buy fancy equipment. Some people like broadcasting, which is really broadcast plus banding on the side. So whereas the band part is just pure banding before planting and banding also during the growing season. And so these two, you noticed, half pre-plant, half, half pre-plant, and the other half split for broadcast and band, because the optimum research has shown that the optimum way to apply nitrogen is 50% at pre-plant and then 50% spread throughout the season. Because you don't want to put all of it at once. I told you nitrogen is very water soluble. You put it all at once, it will disappear with water, and then the plant a month later will be starving for food. Okay, the optimum application for potassium. This one you can apply all the amount that the soil test recommends as a broadcast, pre-plant, mix it in, and you can figure it rest of the season. You took care of it pre-planting, broadcast, incorporate it, and you're done. Phosphorus, the best way to apply, to worry or to take care of phosphorus is a band application, pre-plant, because like I told you, phosphorus does not move in the soil. You put it in the band, it will be there the whole season. So this is really, these 3 slides are good for a commercial operation or for a homeowner or a gardener who want to use N, P, and K, the separate elements, not buy a pre-packaged bag, and I'll show you a slide of that, which I do. I have those separate. I have urea for N, I have muriate of potash for potassium, and I have rock phosphate for phosphorus. If the soil test tells me I don't need phosphorus, I just use N and K. If the soil test tells me I don't need K or phosphorus, I just use my urea N for the rest of the season. So some home gardeners who want to go to the second level, they buy these individual elements, and then these 3 slides will tell you the best way to worry about your nitrogen, the best way to apply your potassium, and the best way to apply your phosphorus. Okay, and this is a very old slide. I like to use it. You see, here's the line. Let me use the mark. Oops. Come on, excuse me. Computer's playing. Okay, so here's the line where you're gonna plant. Okay. And they get trench here, and he's going to sprinkle the fertilizer. In this case, phosphorus. I would, since there's nothing planted, phosphorus pre-plant. Okay, so you can use a seeder, garden seeder, to apply your fertilizer. You just adjust the depth with this drop plate here. You put fertilizer instead of seed, and then you go on the side and dig a trench and apply your phosphorus fertilizer, for example. So it does not have to be over the corner of the hole, for example. You want to fertilize using drip irrigation on a larger scale, or if you're like me, you travel a lot, maybe this is a good way because I have a timer, like to start watering at this time, shut off water at that time, and I have an injector and I put them all together, and I'm not worried that I can travel, and I'm not worried that the plants are not getting water and they're not getting fertilizer. So that's the one advantage of fertigation or drip or adding fertilizer with the irrigation water. That's what fertigation means, and it can be simply using this Venturi siphon, $20 available at many garden stores. The when to apply is our next topic, and I alluded to some of that when I told you, for example, in the previous slides that half before planting and the other half spread 3 times. That's a general guide. That's a great start for many of them, for many gardeners. Um, Let me go into details on the scheduling. But first, let me remind you that there are fertilizers that we call starter fertilizer, and they're typically of this type of formulation: a little bit of N, a lot of phosphorus, and either a little bit or no potassium. So a lot of phosphorus. And if you remember what I told you about NPK, N is for leaves, P is for roots, K is for fruits. So this type of fertilizer is we're called starter fertilizer because um, that's a high amount of fertilizer at one time before immediately after transplanting. Only for transplants, not for seeds. Will give those roots a shot of fertilizer only in that spot to get them started a lot faster. Even if your soil is high and has sufficient amount of phosphorus, if you use a starter fertilizer only once after transplanting, will help the plant get started better. Now, you want to play gardening professionally, play with the big leagues. Here is an example of amount of pound of N required per acre per week at the various stages. A homeowner half the amount before planting, the other half split it 2 or 3 times. If you commercial grower and you want to get maximum potential yield to make the maximum amount of money at the vegetative stage, you want to apply 5 to 10 pound of N per acre per week. When they start flowering, 15 to 20. When flowers develop and they're bulking up, little bit less N, because remember, N is for foliage. P, I mean, this slide doesn't show you P and K, but you know, to say, I don't want to grow the plant anymore. I want to stabilize it, but to the level or a little bit less to the one of flower and fruit stem. And when you start at first harvest, you are fertilizing the tomato plant that's 3 foot tall as much as you're fertilizing it when it was vegetative and a small seedling, because you don't want to give it a lot of N. I don't want you to grow anymore. I don't want you to give me any more leaves. I just want you to give me the fruits. So starts 5 to 10, 15 to 20, 10 to 15, and then drops back to 5 to 10. And then same thing for pepper and broccoli. And this is only for these 3 crops. We have guides like this for all other crops. But this is just to show you the importance of regular fertilization. You want to play with the big leagues. Maybe instead of fertilizing half the amount before planting and the rest split it over 2 or 3 times, maybe split the whole amount, the total amount recommended for that crop on a weekly basis, and then fertilize accordingly following a regimen like this one. This picture is taken April 25th this year. This is an heirloom tomato I bought from Lowe's, planted it outside, I don't know, maybe a month ago. No, a month, 6 weeks before this picture was taken. just for fun, just a couple of extra plants, extra pots I had, so just to grow them there. And hey, you can get a lot of fruits of an heirloom if you fertilize regularly. And if you start with a tomato, heirloom tomato that is already big. When I put this plant out in probably end of March, the tomato was this tall, and it already had flowers and small fruits like the size of a golf ball. That's how early you want to start your seedlings. If you want to get more yields, especially from heirloom varieties. And this picture, the picture on the right is the same plant taken 4 days later. And this picture here, so the slide I showed you before is that plant on the far left. So the slide before is this plant here, and the other two are determinate tomatoes. There is a trellis, and the plants are leaning on that trellis, but on this side they're not supported, so it's kind of bushy and starting to lean. But the daily watering, and nowadays maybe twice a day, but more and most importantly is that once a week I'm fertilizing them. Once a week I'm fertilizing them, whatever I get my hands on. A fish emulsion, I have that. I have another organic fertilizer, and I also have a tomato fertilizer, um, chemical fertilizer. And here's a close-up of the first three fruits that are harvested. They are here. Beautiful heirloom tomatoes. Taste great. Tasted great. And here are some red soda potatoes. They started germinating, sprouting. I said, oh, why not? Why don't I stick them in pots? I have extra pots. So what I started with this, in case you're interested in growing in container, I put like a couple of inch thick layer at the bottom of the 5 gallon pot, and then covered that potato seed with another inch or two on top of it, and that's it. So really, at the initial planting, the pot was this deep. I did not fill it all the way to the top. And then as they started to sprout and grow, I kept adding more and more. I kept adding more and more soil here. So as the plant started to grow, I added more and more soil, and every time I added more potting mix, I added some fertilizer. And here's how these 6 plants that I kept look like. They're doing great, except I have, I think, a leaf cabbage worm or something that's drilling holes everywhere, which I sprayed BT for it, and hopefully got rid of it. So this is my what I call garden potato, garden tomatoes, and here is my commercial tomatoes. The plant may look smaller, but they are 3 times more loaded with tomatoes, and not because I'm using one fertilizer versus the other. I think location is one. I think being in the soil compared to being in a pot is another. Because being in the pot, I felt that it was getting stressed more often. What did I use in this 2 rows of commercial tomato production? I used a pre-plant fertilizer. Let me start the pen. You see why it's called a pre-plant fertilizer? You see how it has very high amount of phosphorus in it. Again, pre-plant. I used triple 16 and calcium nitrate together in the vegetative stage. When they started flowering, I switched to less nitrogen, less phosphorus, because I don't want leaves, I don't want roots, but I want fruits. The demand for potassium is higher when it's flowering, so I want to make sure it's not, doesn't give me blossom end rot. Of course, I'm always, I mean, still, I'm not saying zero NNP, but lot less. Of course, in fruiting, 13,725 is not much difference than 15,424 in terms of amounts. It's just I'm following a specific protocol for that trial. So, um, you know, um, and these are, and I'm fertilizing with these every 7 to 10 days. As long as it's in the vegetative stage, I'm applying these to get mixed together. The minute I start seeing flowering, I switch to this 13,725 plus calcium nitrate every 10 days, whether I need it or not. The plant needs it. It's growing. And again, uh, the plant never goes through feast and famine. The plant is always reaching out, and as it grows, going into and absorbing nutrients and water, and never starves for lacking fertilizer. The next few slides, I want to show you some fertilizers. I went to Lowe's and Home Depot and I just took pictures of what's available. What's available that a homeowner can buy. This is triple 13, covers up to 5,000 square feet for what is it? Look how cheap it is. So this is another brand, triple 10. This one, they has those grains in them that will make the water stick and not so it stays longer, and it also has iron, magnesium, and 3 chelated essential minerals. So you want those. Remember, the plant doesn't only need NPK; it needs the micronutrients and the secondary elements like calcium, magnesium. Okay. There's 888. You can buy 888, 8, 10, 10. That's not much difference than 888, but this company's approach is to add essential micronutrient for complete nutrition. So, don't look at the price. Never look at the price first if you're buying large amounts or you want to buy organic. See what else it does have in it. Is it organic but has nothing in it except N? Why do you need it? You need micronutrient, unless you have in mind another source of the micronutrient that you're going to supply it from. This is an example of a starter fertilizer, 24, 25, 4. I don't like to see N that high, but it's okay. It's $10.47 for a, how much amount? I don't see it clearly, but it's not a very big bag, maybe 3 to 5 pound bag. But again, this will last you many years because you only use it once immediately after transplanting. So it can last you a long time depending on the size of the garden. Here's another example of a starter fertilizer. Even if it doesn't say start, like it says here, just the formulation type 214-0, it should be a clue to you that it's a starter fertilizer. Remember, the N and K are not very high, but P is very high. That's a clue that it's a starter fertilizer. Use it only once, immediately after transplanting. You can buy 2100, only source of nitrogen. That's not urea. This is more than likely ammonium nitrate or calcium nitrate. See, here's the source of only nitrogen. Your soil test tell you I don't need P and K. Micro elements are fine. Hey, for $10, you have a bag that weighs 20 pounds, will last you a whole year. Here is a lawn fertilizer, 2905. You can use it in your vegetable garden. Just make sure that it does not have any herbicide in it, because some of them they called weed and feed. You don't want to have buy something that has a lawn fertilizer. So this covers 15,000 square feet, 2905. That's a little bit better than 2100. Your soil test tell you I don't need phosphorus, I don't need potassium. Well, great. You're getting 29% N. You use small amount of it because it's rich in N, percent wise. This is an organic. So if you remember these slides, 20, 21, 24, 8, 10, 10, 8, 8, 8. You look at the organic fertilizers, you drop to 2, 7, 4, especially the N. Okay, so like I told you, if the N in organic fertilizer is super high, like a 20, I will use it, but I'm not going to call it organic fertilizer. They spiked it and added something else to it, and they can call it whatever they like and get away with it. Here is another all-purpose plant food, organic, clearly says organic fertilizer, 555. The price-wise, this 4-pound bag will be more expensive than the 20-pound bag or 30-pound bag of 888 or 1313 that is not organic, that is chemical fertilizer. And that's proof of the slide I showed you earlier that they are more expensive. Here is another herb and leafy green plant food, organic, 545. Well, how is that different from 555 and this one is for fruits? I don't know. You explain to me because I don't understand how 555 is good for fruits and 545 is good for your leaves, for your green type, leafy green vegetables like lettuce, spinach, kale, cilantro, parsley, things like that. Here is another one by the same company, tomato, herb, and vegetables. So for all of them, 546, same thing. Maybe I didn't read the label specifically to see if there's any other micronutrient in there that I'm not aware of. But it's not just cost. It's don't fall for the hype. The plant doesn't care that the bag is yellow and looks pretty. They just want food. That's my opinion. Here is blood meal, rich in nitrogen, but so here's 12% nitrogen. But look closely. It says 12% insoluble nitrogen. To me and to you, that should mean that it is a slow release. If your plant is suffering from nitrogen deficiency, it's pale, it's small, you add that, it's not going to perk up in 2 days. You have to add something else. I would add that 2 or 3 weeks before you want it to be taken up by the plant. It's a great fertilizer. They're making new versions of blood meal that is water soluble, which will make it more available. Here is bone meal. It's a pure source of phosphorus. Well, this has a little bit of nitrogen, but look how the phosphorus is very high. So I would use that also as a starter fertilizer because it's 2,14,0. Osmocote, I think it's a great fertilizer. It's a very slow release. These beads, when they get wet, they burst and release the fertilizer that's in them. Great for potting pots if you grow in containers or potted plants because you cannot over fertilize or burn the plants because 1 or 2 burst every day and you don't release too much fertilizer. If you choose to use a slow release fertilizer like Osmocote Plus, I recommend you use it at planting, like when you first start, but you also need to add regular fertilizer with it, not just rely on the Osmocote only, because it's a slow release. You want something quick release available now. Here is Miracle Glow. Some people swear by it, some people hate it because it's synthetic. It's 24, 8, 16. And then has boron, copper, iron, manganese, zinc, molybdenum, has everything. Uh, I don't see calcium. If you use that, I recommend you also use calcium nitrate or something else so you don't get um, blossom end rot. Of course, just looking at the picture, I see flowers. I do see a pepper. The minute I see a fruit, then I say, well, where's the calcium? I need calcium to avoid the blossom end rot. But it's very rich, 24, 8, 16. You use a tablespoon per gallon, things like that, or half a 1.5 teaspoon per gallon. So it can be pricey compared to that 50-pound bag, but it lasts a long time. So in summary, if you ever have a nitrogen deficiency, so don't think that foliar spray will fix it. It's better to add the fertilizer to the soil because the roots are made to absorb the minerals. The leaves absorb 5 to 10%. So if you need a lot of nitrogen and you absorb 5%, it's not going to work. Foliar spray works if you have micronutrient deficiency. Because, for example, if iron, it needs half a part per million, or let's say it needs 1 part per million. Well, if it absorbs 1% of what you sprayed, that's more than sufficient to meet the iron deficiency requirement. So, and I have seen plants, they turn from green, yellowish iron deficiency symptoms in a day or 2 days to dark green after foliar application of iron chelates. But your plant is deficient in NP or K, you better add NP or K to the soil, not to foliar spray. I just received an email with nice article, Finding Value in Poultry Litter as Fertilizer. It's at this link, but maybe the easiest way for you is to go to agrilifeextension.tamu.edu, or you should bookmark that. There's always good articles on various topics. agrilifeextension.tamu.edu and search in the search bar, type poultry litter, and it will take you to that. It's made like a 5-minute video on how to do some calculations.